Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng opens his speech with "What a day" following government's scrapped plans to abolish income tax rate following widespread criticism. And Iran's supreme leader blames United States and Israel for the anti-government protests sweeping the country in his first public comments on the unrest. The leaders of Hungary, Serbia and Austria have pledged new measures to contain the flow of illegal migrants into the European Union through the Western Balkans as border control forces become increasingly strained. In the first 8 months of this year, 86,581 irregular entries were detected at the external borders of the European Union with the Western Balkans, according to Frontex. That's a 190% increase from last year. The measures would be aimed at pushing down the EU's front line of defense towards North Macedonia from Hungary's southern border with Serbia, deporting illegal migrants and creating areas outside the bloc's borders to submit asylum requests, said Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, which initiated the efforts. The leaders aim to thrash out specifics on how to finance the measures during an upcoming meeting in Belgrade. Vladimir Vučić, the Serbian Prime Minister, would align its recent policies with those of the EU so migrants cannot use Serbia as the first country of entry, adding that there was a notable increase in arrivals from Syria, Pakistan and Afghanistan. Mr. Vučić, however, added that Serbia did not want hotspots for migrants. The European Union and Israel have held high-level talks for the first time in a decade, with the Europeans keen to press the Prime Minister of Israel, Yair Lapid, on how to put up a two-state solution to the conflict with the Palestinians in place. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell welcomed the recent support from Mr. Lapid, who took part in talks by video conference for an end to the conflict based on an Israeli and Palestinian state living peacefully side by side. Israel's military occupation of the West Bank is now in its 55th year. The last real peace talks ended in 2009, and critics say growing Israeli settlements in the West Bank and elsewhere undermine any hopes of a two-state solution. The Palestinians seek all of the West Bank, along with Israeli-annexed East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, controlled by the Palestinian militant group Hamas, for a future state. About 7,000 people have amassed in front of Moldova's government buildings to protest against the country's energy regulators' latest decisions to raise the gas price, which is currently 6 times that price it was 1 year ago. Moldova's energy authorities have recently raised the price of natural gas again to 30 Moldovan leu, about $1.5 per cubic meter, while headline inflation in the country has surged to over 34%. Amidst the soaring living costs, massive protesters took to the streets to express their dissatisfaction and demand action from the government to address pressing problems. The protesters called for the resignation of the government and the president and for early elections to be held by the mostly pro-presidential parliament. In response, Moldovan President Maia Sandu made a public speech saying that the taxpayers' money had been stolen for hiring the protesters and paying the people who attempt to make money by protests instead of working. This round of protests began on September the 18th. From Monday to Saturday, people camped outside the parliament and the presidential buildings, where they stayed day and night to rally. Such protests gathered an average of about 7,000 per week, according to the local police office. The kingdom has U-turned on plans to scrap the 45p rate of income tax. The Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng has confirmed this, saying that the proposals announced just 10 days ago had become a massive distraction on what was a strong package. The decision, which marks a climb down for Prime Minister Liz Truss, comes after several Tory MPs voiced their opposition to the plan. The plan to scrap the 45p rate paid by people earning over £150,000 a year had been criticized as unfair at a time of rising living costs.
Well, I get it. We not only talked to people, we saw people's reactions, we were talking to constituents, we were talking to a whole range of stakeholders, and we felt that the 45p issue, the 45p rate, was drowning out a strong package of intervention on energy, a strong package of intervention on tax cuts for people generally, and we decided not to proceed with getting rid of the 45p rate. We're 100% focused on the growth plan. And I've been in Parliament 12 years. There have been lots of policies which, when government listens to people, they've decided to change their mind. It was the energy intervention was a huge deal. The cut in the 1p cut in the basic rate was also a massive deal. It gives £330 to the average person in this country, lifting people out of, doubling the nil band for stamp duty. These were strong positive measures. And as I've said, the 45p rate was simply a huge distraction on what was a strong growth package. And my job now is to make sure that we deliver on the growth plan.
Meanwhile, Britain's opposition Labour Party says, quote, so much damage has already been done by the government's September 23 mini budget. According to its finance spokesperson, Rachel Reeves, the damage was done when the Chancellor got up and made a fiscal statement without any type of independent forecasts, with huge amounts of borrowing to pay for tax cuts for those who are already wealthy. British Prime Minister Liz Truss was forced into a U-turn after less than a month in power, reversing a cut to the highest rate of income tax that helped spark turmoil in financial markets and a rebellion in her party. The shadow chancellor said the proposal was not going to go through the House of Commons, forcing the government into this, quote, screeching U-turn. Let's leave Britain and go to other stories. An Opus Dei businessman and retired military officer accused of murdering a journalist entered a technical tie in Sunday's run to become Lima's next mayor, and that's according to an exit poll carried out by the firm Ipsos for Peru's local elections. Rafael Lopez Aliaga, a hotel businessman who claims to practice celibacy and is known as Porky, a famous cartoon character, led the vote with 26.8%. Stepping on his toes, retired military officer Daniel Uresti, who is on trial for allegedly participating in the murder of a media worker in 1988, has obtained 25.8% of the votes. The result of the poll, broadcast by American television, showed a technical tie. Insecurity, poverty, and scarce public services are amongst the main issues to tackle for the upcoming mayor of the municipality of 10.5 million residents. The first partial official results of the electoral office are expected at about 10 p.m. in a process where some 13,000 authorities are set to be elected. The results in the mining regions, which benefit from high revenues driven by taxes and royalties, will also be key, since Peru is the world's second largest copper producer. And in the United States, as the total of lives lost to Hurricane Ian nears 100, the search and rescue efforts are still going on. Our Washington correspondent, Mara Bird, brings us the very latest.
Death tolls are expected to rise as a result of Hurricane Ian ravaging through Florida, the Carolinas, and some parts of Virginia and the U.S. This storm has displaced one man who recently moved to Florida to retire.
Just moved down June 15th or June 1st, and I was down getting the house ready and everything, and here come the hurricane, and I had to evacuate and everything, and now I've lost everything. Everything, my life savings, everything, my tools, everything. I mean, you look around here, there's nothing. We have no power, no phone service, nothing. So we just like a little help. I'd like a little help to get my home back in shape because I have nowhere to go.
The storm has left over 500,000 homes and businesses without power, and emergency response teams have no expected date or time of when the residents can expect power. Hurricane Ian has impacted the already failing infrastructure in the U.S. The storm recovery is expected to cost more than $10 billion. This is predicted to be the most expensive storm recovery. U.S. President Joe Biden and the First Lady will visit the region on Wednesday to see the devastation firsthand. The Biden administration is committed to supporting the states impacted by the hurricane.
Our hearts, to state the obvious, it can't go without saying, are heavy. The devastating hurricane storms in Puerto Rico, Florida, and South Carolina. My administration is working closely with the CBC members to do whatever it takes to help search and rescue, recovery, and rebuilding. It's going to take a long time, so we cannot tire. Whatever it takes, I mean it, whatever it takes.
The U.S. will be in hurricane season until early November, and it is predicted that due to global warming, hurricanes that hit the U.S. will reach catastrophic hurricane strengths. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channels Television News.
And staying in the Americas, but moving on to Latin America, where Brazil's election is going into a second round in which left-winger Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva will face far-right incumbent Jair Bolsonaro. With almost all the votes counted, Lula had won 48% against Bolsonaro's 43%, a much closer result than opinion polls had suggested. But Lula fell short of the more than 50% of valid votes needed to prevent a runoff. Voters now have 4 weeks to decide which of the two should lead Brazil. Winning outright in the first round was always going to be a tall order for any candidate. The last time it happened was 24 years ago. But President Bolsonaro and Lula had given their supporters hope that they could achieve just that. Both candidates can and will claim this as a victory, though Lula has already said that this is a, quote, mere delay on his way to the presidency. For the 76-year-old former metal worker who could not run in the 2018 election because he was in prison after being convicted on corruption charges which were later annulled, this spells a remarkable comeback. And President Bolsonaro, whom opinion polls had shown trailing far behind Lula, will rejoice in the fact that he proved the pollsters wrong, just as he had predicted that he would. In Germany, the political elite convened in Erfurt to celebrate German Unification Day. Chancellor Olaf Scholz and German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier signed a work of art commemorating the country's unity on the national holiday. Together with Bundestag President and Federal Constitutional Court President, they added their signatures to a 2-meter stylized heart. The red-yellow heart on a black background is intended to symbolize the 32nd anniversary of German unity. The event took place under the motto, Growing Together, which is meant to describe the reunification as well as resulting opportunities for West and East. German Chancellor Scholz also used the opportunity to call out the Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying he should end this war. Then it will be possible for us to further develop the European peace order, as we have all done before, adding that we stand together and support Ukraine and the country's citizens in their fight for freedom, unity, and justice for their own country. Over in Pakistan today, a court accepted an apology tendered by former Prime Minister Imran Khan and dropped a contempt of court case against him. His defense lawyer said a ruling that eases the threat to him of disqualification from politics. The Islamabad High Court had deferred Mr. Khan's indictment over the contempt case after he apologized to the court in person late last month. A convicted politician is liable to be disqualified from contesting elections and holding a public office for at least 5 years under Pakistani law. Defense lawyer Faisal Chaudhry told local reporters that Mr. Khan had extended his apology and the court today reciprocated by discharging the case against him. The charges were related to a speech made by Mr. Khan in which he was accused of threatening police and judicial officers after one of his close aides was denied bail in a sedition case. Mr. Khan had been leading rallies since his dismissal, demanding snap elections, which the ruling coalition has rejected, saying voting will be held as scheduled later next year. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has blamed the United States and Israel for protests that have gripped the country for more than 2 weeks, accusing both countries of trying to stop Iran's, quote, progress. Ayatollah Khamenei branded the anti-government protests, some of the biggest in the country, as riots. The 83-year-old leader had remained silent on the protests, which erupted after a 22-year-old Kurdish woman, Mahsa Amini, died last month in the custody of Iran's morality police. He told graduating cadets at the police university in Tehran, quote, I say explicitly that these riots and this insecurity were designed by the U.S. and the occupying fake Zionist regime Israel and those who were paid by them, and some treacherous Iranians abroad who helped them. Mr. Khamenei sought to further cast the unrest as part of a foreign effort to destabilize Iran, saying another, quote, excuse would have been found to destabilize the country if it were not for Khamenei's death. Iran's supreme leader argued that the unrest was an attempt to stop the country from the advances he said it had made, despite harsh U.S. sanctions imposed since 2018 when Washington unilaterally abandoned Iran's 2015 nuclear deal with world powers. Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov has said his 3 teenage sons, aged 14, 15, and 16, will soon head to Ukraine to fight on the front lines. Mr. Kadyrov, a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, shared a video of his sons on Telegram and said, minor age should not interfere with the training of the defenders of our motherland. The grandchildren of the first president of the Chechen Republic, hero of Russia, Akhmat Kadzi Kadyrov, Akhmat, Eli, and Adam are 16, 15, and 14, respectively. But their military training began a long time ago, almost from an early age, and it's not enough just to know how to shoot. Kremlin-backed Mr. Kadyrov made the announcement 2 days after he said Moscow should consider using a low-yield nuclear weapon in Ukraine after Russian forces retreated in some areas. He also criticized the Russian military command, saying its retreat from the city of Lyman in eastern Ukraine was as a result of incompetence. To health, the UK and continental Europe have been hit by an unprecedented number of cases of avian flu this summer, with 47.7 million birds having been culled since last autumn. That's according to the latest figures. Poultry producers from as far north as Norway's Svalbard Islands to southern Portugal have together reported almost 2,500 outbreaks of the disease since last year. There have also been thousands of outbreaks recorded in wild birds, according to the latest update from the EU's European Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, the European Food Safety Authority, and the EU Reference Laboratory. The virus reached breeding colonies of seabirds on the North Atlantic coast, killing them in huge numbers. In past years, outbreaks of avian flu declined with warmer weather and the end of migration with wild birds in the autumn and winter. But outbreaks have continued across the UK and elsewhere in Europe this summer, leading to fears that highly pathogenic variants of avian flu are now endemic in wild birds, creating a risk of infection all year. From June to September, the number of outbreaks in domesticated birds was more than 5 times higher than the same period last year. Experts say all kinds of bird species have become infected now, causing the virus to remain. Bulgarians were skeptical today that the result of Sunday's elections, the 4th in less than 2 years, would bring much change to the political landscape. The center-right GERB party of former long-serving Prime Minister Boyko Borisov looks set to win Sunday's election, according to partial results, but his chances of forming a coalition government remain unclear. With 99% of the ballots counted, partial official results showed GERB winning 25.4%. Its main rival, the Reformist Party, continuing with a change of Kirill Petkov, whose coalition government collapsed in June, came second with 20.2%. The results point to difficult coalition talks in a fractured parliament or even another snap election in the European Union member state. Either would prolong political instability amid steep surge in energy and consumer prices and war in Ukraine and raise the prospect of Bulgaria missing its 2024 target date for entry into the single currency Eurozone. Efforts to put together a functioning coalition are complicated by the fact that many of Mr. Borisov's political adversaries accuse him of allowing widespread corruption to fester during his decade-long rule that ended last year. Mr. Borisov denies the allegations. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine has been awarded to Svante Pääbo, a Swedish-born scientist who has spent decades trying to extract DNA from a 40,000-year-old bone, culminated in the unveiling of the Neanderthal genome in 2010. The publication of that genome opened the door to investigating questions that had bedeviled paleontologists since Neanderthal fossils were first found in a German quarry in 1856. How did those early humans relate to modern ones, and what made them different? According to the Nobel Committee, Dr. Pabo's abiding obsession, how to recover and analyze ancient genetic material, seemed destined to founder in the face of vexing technical issues. Ancient DNA suffers from chemical damage and tends to be present in ancient samples at very low levels. It can easily be drenched in the DNA of scientists charged with handling it, making it difficult to distinguish ancient genes from modern ones. Bacteria can leave DNA in fossils too, forcing scientists to learn how to pick out those genes as well.
The Nobel Assembly at Karolinska Institutet has today decided to award the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine to Svante Pääbo for his discoveries concerning the genomes of extinct hominins and human evolution. Institute.
Humanity has always been intrigued by its origins. Where do we come from? And how are we related to those who came before us? Thanks to his seminal discoveries, genetic variants that are shared among all now living humans, but absent in Neanderthals and Denisovans, have been identified.
Yes, I did reach him on the phone. This year he was situated in Leipzig, so it was, he was not in bed. So it was easy to reach him. He was overwhelmed, he was speechless and very happy, and asked if he could tell anyone, and asked if he could tell his wife, and I said that was okay. Yeah, he was incredibly thrilled about this award.
The head of the UN mission in the DRC, MONUSCO, says the surge in internal displacement since January of 2022 has brought the total number of displaced people to 5.5 million, the largest caseload in Africa. Briefing the United Nations Security Council, Binta Keita, special representative of the Secretary General for the Democratic Republic of Congo, says that armed groups continue to pose a significant threat and commit violence against civilians. According to Mr. Keita, most abuses are being perpetrated by the cooperative pour le Développement du Congo, Codeco, Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, and the M23 rebels in Ituri and North Kivu, while Mai groups and other militias have intensified attacks on civilians in the south.
Armed groups continue to pose a significant threat and commit violence against civilians. Most abuses are being perpetrated by Coopérative pour le Développement du Congo, Codeco, Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, and the Mouvement du 23 Mars, M23, in Ituri and North Kivu, while Mai groups and other militias have intensified attacks on civilians in South Kivu. This insecurity fuels human rights violations and has exacerbated an already dire humanitarian situation. An estimated 27 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance, with many having protection needs. A clear indicator of the deteriorating situation is a surge in internal displacement since January 2022, which has brought the total number of displaced people to 5.5 million, the largest caseload in Africa.
That's Binta Keita, Special Representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations for the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the United Nations mission in South Sudan recently organized a 3-day capacity building conference for personnel of the country's National Prison Service on how other UN member states are promoting gender equality and working to reduce sexual and gender-based violence by implementing institutional and prison service reforms. The workshop was under the theme Gender-Friendly Prison Service for Vulnerable Groups in Prison.
UNMISS is supporting gender mainstreaming in the security sector under the broader framework of implementing UNSCR's 1325 and subsequent resolutions on women, peace and security in South Sudan. This is a core element of global, regional, national and local efforts to build effective, accountable and inclusive institutions at all levels.
The prison officers actually are the ones responsible for those category of people that are the lowest. So by choosing to train them, actually we will be promoting the issues to do with peace within South Sudan and making the conditions humane for them. It's actually very important that the issues of gender are actually spoken about, or this gender is spoken out to the community, and it starts from the prison officers themselves around here, because they belong to the community and they are handling the most vulnerable people in the society.
Despite its efforts, South Sudanese prisons still don't have a sufficient number of women among their employees to be a truly gender-friendly workplace.
In this workshop, we have learned a lot. Cooperation on women's rights, or men's rights, or equality between men and women in the workshop we just had. We learned about how to handle inmates, and the way to search female inmates, and also how we can encourage them.
The workshop, organized for senior managers, aimed at prompting a discussion on how to reach international standards of gender-friendly prison services and the treatment of offenders. Among the priorities and challenges identified were good leadership, accountability, discipline, and respecting all human rights.
You are our true partner. Gender affairs in the UNMISS, child protection, these are our true partners. Because in the prison, we have women. In the prison, we have children. And we call them the vulnerable groups.
South Sudan is still facing many obstacles and difficulties in preventing violence, protecting women from abuse, and ensuring women's access to justice. But this workshop was, according to participants, a step in the right direction.
Mauto, a company specializing in sustainable transportation, has launched 2 types of electric motorbikes that are in Togo and Benin Republic in the hopes of boosting local economies and reducing polluting emissions. Take a look in this our final piece.
Cotonou resident Aruna Damasi ignites his new electronic motorbike as he slides silently among the throttling column of motorcycles swarming through rush hour traffic in Benin's capital. The 40-year-old informal trader is the proud new owner of an electric two-wheeler made by India-based company M Auto, which launched bikes in Benin and Togo this year.
It's an ecological motorcycle, which means it doesn't pollute, it doesn't have smoke. So compared to a petrol motorcycle, you have to agree with me that I am helping in the protection of my environment.
When the battery runs low, drivers do not have to stop and recharge, but simply replace it at one of M Auto's 14 swapping stations in Cotonou for 1,000 CFA francs. Emmanuel Ahuwendo owns the bigger M Auto model called the Commando. He uses it for deliveries and other jobs. For him and the manufacturers, driving an electric motorcycle is first of all an economical choice.
Non seulement elle pollue l'environnement.
Not only do the regular ones pollute the environment, there are so many parts to change. Every week, every weekend, you have to change the oil. There are small parts to change very frequently, like the chain, and you even have to clean the carburetor sometimes. So this new motorcycle, I find to be more economical. I only have to change the battery and it starts.
Donc, cette nouvelle moto,
le plus difficile, mais
We believe in the fact that the electric argument alone is not enough. People have to find an economic benefit. And once they've found that, the ecological arguments will be added. And today, we have customers from all social categories. We have a lot of women who ride our motorcycles, and it's a real pleasure.
Et donc aujourd'hui, on a des clients dans toutes les catégories.
Will-be drivers are concerned about having to plan routes around battery points rather than filling up from contraband petrol vendors found on almost every street corner. M-Auto also has to look into producing longer-lasting batteries, as typically their scooters run out of power after between 70 and 120 kilometers, according to a swapping station employee. Yet, M-Auto has sold over 2,000 e-mopeds since May and aims to make more than 15,000 on East and West African roads by year-end.
M-Auto electric bikes there in Benin Republic and Togo. And that's how we end the program this evening. Thanks for your company. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 o'clock with another edition of the program. My name is Ladi Akeri Delwale. To have yourselves a pleasant evening.